Welcome to the Adoption and Foster Care Journey, a podcast to encourage, educate, and equip you to care for children and youth through adoption, foster, and kinship care. Hosted by an adoptive mom with over 22 years of kinship and adoptive parenting experience. She's on this journey with you. Please welcome Sandra Flach.
For we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared beforehand that we should walk in them. That is Ephesians 2, verse 10. I am your host, Sandra Flach. Welcome to this FASD Awareness Month episode of the Adoption and Foster Care Journey podcast, where I am here as always to encourage and equip you for your parenting journey. I'm on this journey too with you. I'm a mom of 8 kids, 5 through adoption, including 2 young adult sons, both diagnosed with fetal alcohol syndrome when they were much younger. I got a couple other adult kids who probably is somewhere also. They're on the spectrum, just not diagnosed because way back in those days we had no clue. But we've struggled for many, many years. And my hope is that you will find this podcast an invaluable resource as you navigate your parenting journey, because my passion is to serve you, because I know what this is like. And we want to be a resource for you. Speaking of resources, I've been each week kind of given a little teaser about my devotional book that's to be released, hopefully, prayerfully in November. My editor has been very, very sick, and all of his clients are sort of, kind of nail biting it to try to get our edits back. Our book cover has been designed, and I'm super excited about that. I'll be giving a sneak peek about with that online soon. But the name of the book, the title is Soul Care Saturday, 52 Devotions for Foster and Adoptive Moms. And again, we're hoping to release that in time for National Adoption Awareness Month, but definitely in time for the holidays, and be able to tell you more about that and show you more about that soon. And also be sure, if you haven't done it yet, check out our updated, newly revised website, justicefororphansny.org. There is a link in the show notes. I say we, but our fabulous web designer, Kathy Seawalk, she revised the website. So now when you go there on the homepage, you can clearly see it will say the Adoption and Foster Care Journey. And that's where all of the resources for foster and adoptive parents reside. And if you click that, it will take you to a space where it looks like you're in adoption and foster care journey world. And that's where all of the training, you can learn about whatever FASD workshops are coming up, the support group, parent coaching, if you're interested in that. The podcast is there. My blog that you can read is there. It's all there for you. So I hope that you will check it out, and you can go there. And if you're interested in being added to my list where you would receive my monthly digital newsletter. I don't bombard you with a whole bunch of stuff, but once a month I post a blog post, and once a month I email out a newsletter. You can check that out. You can sign up to be able to get that as well. So all of that is there. I hope that you will check it out. And of course, be sure to like and follow our Adoption and Foster Care Journey social pages. We're on Instagram at AFC_journey and on Facebook at the Adoption and Foster Care Journey. So I look forward to connecting with you on those pages as well. And of course, I'd love to connect with you in person. When this episode launches, which is the end of September, I will be about pretty much getting on an airplane and heading to Houston, Texas for the Christian Alliance for Orphans Summit, which is October 1st through 3rd, where I will be leading a workshop, Hope Beyond Frustration, Incremental Growth Through Simple and Consistent Practices, as well as an FASD meetup for parents and caregivers, where we have a room set aside for us, and we're just going to meet and have some fellowship and some encouragement and some prayer. So I hope if you go to CAFO, that you will find me. I'll have an exhibitor booth there as well. And then I will also be at Replanted in Chicago on October 23rd through 25th, where I'll also be leading a workshop, Wired Differently, Understanding FASD Trauma and the Brain. And I will have an exhibitor booth there as well. So I hope you take the time to get out to some of these conferences. I've got some other ones coming up in the new year. I will be at FILD at the very end of January. It's like January 30th, February 1st in Pennsylvania. I'll be leading a workshop there. I will also be at, oh goodness, I'll be in Ohio in March. I'll be in, let's see, I'll be in Alabama, Birmingham, Alabama in February. So we'll be posting those as we get closer, but lots of opportunities for us to connect in person. And of course, I would love to come and speak at your event, whether it be an adoptive and foster parent retreat or conference, or if you want something specific for your church where I can come in and meet and teach on FASD, bring some encouragement, all of those things, you can reach out to me. My email address as well as the website and all of that are in the show notes, so you can easily find us. So, but on to some more exciting things before we get to our final FASD month episode and today's guest. I'm excited to share with you the news that came about last week. Thanks to the tremendous work of FASD United and their affiliate organizations, to which we are one, and fierce parent and self-advocates, the United States Senate passed the FASD Respect Act as part of the Support Act. Now it awaits the president's signature to be enacted into law. What does it mean? Well, the FASD Respect Act would improve previously authorized programs and established new comprehensive FASD-informed prevention, identification, and intervention programs to improve supports for the FASD community. Finally, FASD will have a seat at the table. So we'll talk about that a little bit more with our guest as well. And today we have with us Julia Rivera. Julia is a retired attorney and co-founder of the Texas FASD Network. After years of unsuccessfully seeking interventions for her son's perceived behavioral issues, he was finally diagnosed with the underlying problem, Fetal Alcohol Spectrum Disorder, FASD. Implementing the neurobehavioral model for FASD revolutionized her parenting and saved her son. When she's not advocating for FASD awareness, you can find Julia at her home in Kansas City, in the Kansas City area with her 3 boys, her hubby Angel, her son, who is now 22, and her cat Buster. So please welcome to the show, Julia Rivera. Hey, Julia, welcome to the show.
Hello, I'm thrilled to be here with you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, well, I'm thrilled to get to meet you finally. I wasn't able to meet you at Impact Week in DC, but just excited to have you here on the show and have this conversation with you. I know we're both passionate advocates on this topic of FASD, so glad to have you here. I always like to start out with kind of finding out the story of adoption stories and where the whole journey started for my guests. So would you share that with us?
Well, my husband and I decided to adopt, and we were lucky enough to be matched with a child. It happened to be in Guatemala that we chose to adopt from. And our child was 4 months of age, so really a tiny little baby when we got him and brought him home, and he was happy and healthy, and things seemed pretty good.
Yeah. So at what point did things stop seeming pretty good?
Well, it was clear from the outset that he had trouble sleeping through the night, but I mean, that's not unexpected. A little infant having trouble sleeping through the night is not surprising.
Right.
Um, but it continued and continued and continued. And we tried lots of different approaches and techniques, read all the books, tried the different things. Nothing worked. Nothing worked. And ultimately, um, we slept with him because that allowed him to relax and um, get his regular. It was just a, in retrospect, I now know it was a self-regulation issue. At the time, I didn't know why it was, but um, it did allow him to relax and settle and get into sleep and sleep through the night. Anyway, that continued for 12 years. For 12 years, either me or my husband had to sleep with our son.
And then along the way, in addition to the sleeping, as he grew, I'm sure when he started going to school, like what were the other things that were going on that sort of gave you the made you pursue trying to find out what was going on?
Um, from a very young age, as a toddler, I mean, he was clearly smart. He was attractive. He was attached. He was eager to please, but he also had tantrums. I mean, really bad tantrums. He would attack me or his dad with every ounce of strength that his little body had. And so we, read a bunch of books and tried to address it and tried various approaches. That continued. His tantrums continued. I mean, he was it was almost Jekyll and Hyde. He was loving and appropriate and attached and bright and all these lovely things until he wasn't. And then he would express his rage with physically attacking us. I do remember one time he was triggered by little or nothing. I remember one time he was about 3 years old and I was picking him up at the child care center. And, it seemed fine. He took my hand, he left the group. And literally, as we exited the building, the threshold to the building, he started crying and hitting me. And I scooped him up and took him to the car. And I got him in the car, but I didn't even try to put him in his car seat because he was just so aggressive. He was having a tantrum. I mean, he was just uncontrollable. So I waited for it to pass. I got behind the wheel and just sat there and wondered what I'd done wrong. I wondered what was wrong with him. I mean, other parents came, they parked, they walked in, they got their kids, they came out, they left, and he was still tantruming over nothing, over walking out of the building. And so I just sat there behind the wheel. And, ultimately, after the center closed, he finally did calm down, and I was able to buckle him in his car seat, and off we went. And he was fine because the storm had passed. He was exhausted, but I mean, the storm was over.
Mhm.
That was just an example of he would just fly into these aggressive rages that had me mystified.
Yeah. Wow. Were there any other symptoms, like now we know symptoms of FASD? Were there any other symptoms that you were seeing along the way that as you look back and you're like, oh, that was a primary symptom?
Oh, it was all over. It was all over. I mean, um, as he grew, he struggled in school. Um, he had, he was identified as having ADHD and dyslexia and dysgraphia. Um, he clearly didn't get along well with his peers. He could make friends quickly, but he couldn't sustain them. He was gravitating to younger children for playmates. Um, we knew that something was terribly wrong, and so we took him to the pediatrician. We followed her advice. Didn't work. We took him to psychologists. We took him to play therapists. We took him to psychiatrists. By the time he was 14 years old, he'd been seen by 23 different medical professionals.
Wow.
Um, and we didn't just walk in the door. I mean, we did exactly what they told us to do. At that point, he had completed, not started, completed the 16 different programs that they had recommended that were going to address the problem and fix it. Animal assisted therapy, parent education. They sent me to that. I've got a degree in family and child development there, but I humbled myself. I took their parent ed. Didn't work. Nothing worked. Various kinds of psychiatric medications, various kinds of therapies. Nothing provided sustained relief. He still continued to be a Jekyll Hyde. He was loving and wonderful and appropriate, and when he was triggered, he was aggressive. And as he grew, that, of course, became more and more of a serious issue. By the time he was a teenager, it was very serious indeed. We had to call the police on our son. I mean, it was pretty awful.
Yeah, yeah. So how did he, because he ultimately did get diagnosed with an FASD, right? How did you finally get to that point, get the diagnosis? How old was he?
He was 15 when he was finally diagnosed. The 23rd medical professional that we went to was a psychologist who knew something about FASD, and she essentially said, we might have something organic going on here. We might have some FASD. And so we traveled to a state that had a multidisciplinary clinic, and they assessed him, and he was diagnosed with alcohol-related neurodevelopmental disorder, which is, as you know, one of the diagnoses within the FASD umbrella.
Yeah. So what state were you living in, and what state did you have to go to?
I was living in, well, our family was living in Texas at the time, and there was no, and still is no, multidisciplinary diagnostic team in Texas that will diagnose FASD. We traveled to Minnesota, to the University of Minnesota.
Wow. So, and I know a lot of families are in the same boat, right? It's very common that that would be the case. And then did you have history where there was maternal alcohol consumption? How did you, because a lot of times we hear if that's the requirement, right? Doctors, in order to diagnose, want, maternal admission, and we don't often get that when our kids were adopted.
Yeah, when my son was about 11, he indicated that he wanted to find his birth mother. And so we did a search, which was possible to do and still is possible to do in Guatemala, and found her. And were able to go down and visit her and begin developing a bit of a relationship with her. And when we were referred for an assessment, we were able to ask her if there was a possibility that there was prenatal exposure, and she was able to confirm that.
Wow.
You know, many, many adoptive families are not so fortunate.
Right.
And I deeply appreciate her candor in confirming that for us, because it did allow us to obtain the diagnosis that we got.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. It's often hard to get that, right? And so that's incredible that you were able to do it. Once he got the diagnosis, how did you become FASD informed and equipped to be able to help support him?
Um, at the point that he was diagnosed, I mean, he was a teenager, and as the years went by, he had learned, and I had learned, both of us had learned, that when he was raging, the best approach was silent on my part, was to keep my mouth shut and to calm him. And for my son, that meant scratching his back, being very quiet, and allowing him to collect himself and calm. That's not true for everyone, but for my kid, that's what he needed. And so what it had morphed into is that he would even say, I mean, he'd be raging. He would hit me, he would kick, shove, whatever. And then he'd say, now you sit down and stretch my back and do it now. and I would do it. I learned to do it um, because that was what needed to happen at the time. And observers were not kind. They,
No, they would be appalled.
um, right, that I was letting him get away with it, that I was the problem, that behavior was the problem. They just didn't understand. They had no frame of reference for what we were dealing with. Um, you know, I'm sure that you and many of your listeners also have run into the same thing of people not understanding and passing judgment. That's very painful. For me, certainly, that was the most painful part of my journey, was not that my son was aggressive. It was not that my son has a medical condition that will continue for the rest of his life. It's not that he struggled in school or with peers or at home. The most painful part for me personally was the judgment that I experienced from people that I loved.
Mm.
And that was difficult. That was difficult.
It's so hard when people just don't understand. They're not
Mhm.
walking in our shoes. They don't get it, but yet they want to, well-meaning. Even with trauma, I found like we first learned about the impacts of trauma when our youngest finally, came home, and parenting differently because of the trauma. I didn't even know about the FASD yet. And, well-meaning people who don't understand children who've experienced trauma want to give you all kinds of parenting advice, which does not work because traditional parenting methods don't work. And especially when there's been prenatal exposure, it's also doubly not going to work. So that is difficult. Just feeling misunderstood all the time is very hard.
Yeah, I wish, I wish, I'm sure everyone wishes in retrospect that people had offered to help rather than, God bless you.
Thank you. Just a cough. Thank you. Yeah, and as we advocate and educate, hopefully we can get some people to understand, but there's always those out there just observing from the outside. And it's hard because they don't really understand that really. It's the brain, right? The brain is different. It's not willful disobedience and defiance. We have, our children's brains work differently because of that prenatal exposure. So we do have to take a completely different approach. And I know that you are familiar with the neurobehavioral model. So how did you learn the neurobehavioral model?
Well, when I came across it, it rang true. And so I dove into learning about it and um, picked up, picked up. I mean, that changed our lives. It changed our lives. But the other thing I had to do too, um, was get out of the slump I was in, I guess, because I felt isolated, ostracized, and condemned.
Yeah. So common.
Maybe these people around me who were telling me I was screwing up and that I was the problem, maybe they were right and maybe I was wrong. Maybe I was toxic to kids. I mean, I'd always been good with kids, but maybe somehow there was just something about me that was the problem.
Mm.
Everybody seems so sure I was the problem. Um, anyway, I had to deal with that. I mean, I got mad, really. I mean, I felt betrayed by the doctors who had failed to recognize the most prevalent developmental disability on the planet,
Right.
and instead had given me all this misdirection and wasted a lot of time, money, and effort on programs that were ineffective and perhaps even harmful.
Hmm.
I was angry about that. I was angry at the lack of support, and I was angry with myself. I felt like I'd betrayed myself by doubting myself. So I
Hmm.
needed to deal with that. I needed to get over that. And the neurobehavioral approach made sense to me. It rang true to me. I could see that my son was not being deliberately angry or aggressive. It was out of frustration, out of his utter frustration with expectations being placed on him that were appropriate for his chronological age,
Mhm.
but were not appropriate for his developmental age.
Right. Did you take facets training? Did you become a facilitator of facets, or did you take any of the workshops?
Well, I kind of went at it backwards, to tell you the truth. I'd heard about facets, and I saw that they were recruiting board members, and so I trotted out my attorney experience and said, "Hey, you guys need me." And so they were persuaded and put me on the board, and then I took some of the facets training, which I'd already read the book. I'd read other things. I was a member of Facebook groups that were espousing the views. So I mean, it wasn't brand new. It was something that I had absorbed through those means, and changed our lives. Changed our lives. It wasn't, rewards and punishment weren't going to work with this kid. You've got to connect. You've got to be there for them. And let go of those traditional parenting techniques.
Yeah, for sure. I know when we were doing when we our youngest came home at he was 5 and then got diagnosed at 6 along with his brother who was 8 at the time, I think. And the thing that we had come because our kids they both boys got diagnosed with fetal alcohol syndrome and ADHD, and the doctor gave us a pamphlet on ADHD and, said have it sickly. There was no supports, no, there was nothing. And then so when I got home, you turn, as moms do, we turned to the internet to do some research, and the only thing I found out about fetal alcohol syndrome is what we now know are the tertiary characteristics, right? All those terrible outcomes. That's what we had to look forward to. There was no hope. There was nothing else out there. And I just said, well, that's not gonna happen to us, right? And I turned off the computer and then kind of just focused on what we had stumbled upon at that point, which was the connected child, Dr. Karen Purvis. I don't know if you're familiar with any of her
I am.
work, and TBRI. So we did all of those things, which worked. Like we were connected, we had attachment. Like you said, things were great when they were great, but Jekyll and Hyde, it can turn on a dime. And by the time they became teenagers, it was like, okay, we're attached, we're connected, there's a lot of good things, but why is the dumpster on fire again? Like, what is going on? And suspected, it's got to be the one thing that we really don't know enough about, which is the FASD. And at that point, another adoptive mom in North Carolina that I knew, I don't know if you know Natalie Vecchione, she was doing some incredible work. And I knew her because she used to be from New York, and I had interviewed her years ago on the podcast just about her adoption story. The FASD wasn't even part of her story yet, that she like it was, but we didn't know, right? So by that time, Natalie was very active and had her podcast, and so she recommended facets, and we had some long conversations. So I took the training and I kept taking everything until I could become and including the training for facilitator. So I became a certified facilitator because same thing, life changing. And our boys were teenagers also by the time I got that training with the neurobehavioral model, and it changed our lives, and it changed everything. And the more I learned, the more I spoke out on my platform, such as this podcast and the other work that I do with adoptive and foster parents, because I'm like you said, on the planet, this is the number one issue, and nobody knows about it. And so I just began talking about it more and more. But yeah, when we began to learn to parent, understanding the brain, what does the brain have to do with this, and how can we support this individual because they're having a hard time. It changed everything. Um, FASD doesn't go away, but things have vastly improved, and we learn. And our boys are now, our oldest is 22, and our youngest is going to be 20 next month. I can't even believe I'm saying that. Um, But yeah, the neurobehavioral model was a game changer for us as well. Let me ask you this, Julia. What was school like for Jamie? Like, did he finish school? Because he's 22 now, also, correct?
He's 22, yeah. Um, as a very at the very first in early elementary school, he was enthusiastic and excited, just like any 5 or 6 year old is. And he certainly dove into the social relations. He loves to have friends, though though he struggles to maintain friendships. He's very socially motivated. The struggles increased as time went on, and I think that's pretty typical for those with FASD, is that the expectations, um, there's more of a gap between what's expected and what they can perform as time goes on, and that was consistent with his experience. Um, he Things just got worse and worse, and by seventh grade, it was pretty clear that public school was a disaster. So he did not yet have a diagnosis, but we had been told he had learning disabilities and ADHD, so we enrolled him in a private school that was specifically for those with ADHD and learning disabilities. He did pretty well there at first, and then graduated up to their less structured eighth grade program. And he had too much freedom. It wasn't enough structure. Things fell apart. Um, are you still there? I
I'm still
had
here.
lost you.
I can still hear you and see you. There you go. You're back.
Yeah, isn't this fun?
No worries.
Yeah, he went, I don't know where y'all left off, but he started in a private school for the learning disabled, those with ADHD and LD, and that went pretty good until he got up to a less structured program within that same school, and things fell apart. And ultimately, God bless the administration there, they came to us and said, things have deteriorated to the point with his peers that it's beyond remedy, and he needs, unfortunately, we cannot meet his needs.
Mm.
So referred us to a therapeutic school for the neurodiverse. We still did not have a diagnosis at that point, but we were like, okay. And he entered a school that is appropriate for the neurodiverse, although the bulk of their population had autism spectrum disorder. And he was very successful there. Very successful there. They modified their program to meet his needs. He did great. Um, his attitude deteriorated, but they were able to accommodate that and turn that around. It was about at that time that we also got a diagnosis, so we finally knew what we were dealing with. And, both at home and at school, we could take measures to address what we were really seeing now that we finally knew what we were dealing with, which helped tremendously. So much so that, a couple years went by, he did great, and they came and said, he's doing so good, he really doesn't need a therapeutic school anymore. Why don't we, try a less structured one? So we did, and in retrospect, I'm not sure that was a great move because he he went to a new school for kind of for kids that struggle for a variety of reasons. And again, he had trouble with peers, which ultimately led to their saying, we're not able to meet his needs, but we'll just graduate him anyway. So he did graduate high school. So there you go.
Wow. So he's 22. What is he doing today?
Yeah, he's had a couple false starts with living outside the home and trying to study um, a vocation. Um, he's been back in our home now for, gosh, a year, but roughly a year. He has not flourished outside of our home, and the attempts have been short-lived. but he lives at home and he goes to the local community college where he's studying heating and air conditioning. He's making good grades. He's doing okay. It's within, I believe that he will successfully complete this program and uh, work in that field.
That's great. So are his strengths like hands-on mechanical things like that?
Yeah, he gets hands-on, tangible, mechanical things like that. Um, he continues to struggle with interpersonal relationships. Um, I think that probably will be something that will be a struggle for him for a long time, but he's not unsuccessful. It's a struggle, but he does maintain some long-term friendships, thank God. Um, he stays in there. He's got grit. One of our kids' strengths. I don't think it's unusual for those amongst those with FASD. He hangs in there. He keeps trying long beyond the time most people would give up. But he struggles with peers, but and he has had some limited successes. So there you go.
Sandra Flach, host of the Adoption and Foster Care Journey podcast, and FASD educator Debbie Raymond invite you to join Hope for the FASD Journey, a virtual support community for parents and caregivers raising individuals with fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, diagnosed or not. This faith-based support community meets online 3 times each month, features special VIP guests, and a private Facebook group for members only, which includes Soul Care Saturday video devotionals led by Sandra and Deb. Both Sandra and Deb are adoptive moms raising kids with FASD and facilitators of the FASCETS Neurobehavioral Model. For details and to register, visit justicefororphansny.org/hope-community. That's justicefororphansny.org/hope-community.
So I'm thrilled that your son Jamie is doing so well and wish him all that success in that program. One of mine, my 22-year-old son as well, is very mechanical. He can weld and build and do small engine repair and all of that, but yet there are some challenges, right? Especially in that social piece. But I wanted to talk to you about the Texas FASD Network, which you co-founded. Tell us about that.
Oh my, about the time that my son was getting a diagnosis, I reached out to see if there were other folks locally in the Dallas-Fort Worth area that um, also were parenting a child with FASD. And lo and behold, found a few meaning 4. There were 4 of us. And we bonded. We all found that we'd been down the exact same really difficult path. Each of us, separately with our kids, had been down a very difficult path that had ultimately ended with a diagnosis of fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. So we started having meetings and shared with each other, invited others to come. We started giving presentations on our experiences. We found some professionals that knew something about FASD, and the group has flourished from that point. Um, we we it's been jaw-droppingly amazing. We've come across FASD researchers are located in the Texas area and who have joined our board. There's professionals with an interest and knowledge in FASD that have joined our board, and us angry parents that wish FASD knowledge was spread more. We've banded together, and we now we offer support. We offer presentations. We're active, and we're proud, very proud, to have taken part in the passage of the FASD Respect Act as contained within the Support Act. As you know, it was passed earlier this summer in the House, and it just passed the Senate. So pending the president's signature, it will become law.
Yeah, we're super excited about that. I wanted to ask you about that as well. But before we get to the FASD Respect Act, for any of our listeners who are listening in from Texas and they don't already know about the Texas FASD Network, what is the website where they can go and find out more information?
It's texasfasd.org, so they can find us that way. We have a pretty good recently revised website. It identifies resources for families in the Texas throughout the state, really. We do have support groups in some of the metropolitan areas, certainly not all, but we're excited that our group has grown to the point that we now are a significant nonprofit within Texas.
Yeah, and you're an affiliate of FASD United.
Yes, we are.
So again, it's texasfasd.org. Is that
Yes.
And we'll put a link in the show notes so our listeners can find it easily. So, yes, and I had at the top of the show, I did share with our listeners the exciting news about the FASD Respect Act passing the House and now the Senate and waiting for a signature by the president. So, Julia, would you explain for our listeners what does the FASD Respect Act mean for individuals with FASD as well as their families?
It provides some authorization and funding for Health and Human Services to have programs to addressing FASD, and to help the states and the tribes incorporate FASD into their disability systems. So we're early enough in the game that we don't yet know exactly how that's going to trickle down and be of practical use in any one specific geographic area. Health and Human Services needs to play a role. This strikes me as a great time for the state organizations in the FASD space to essentially get their act together, to work with the authorities within that state to ensure that FASD resources and supports and identification and diagnostic capability are folded into the existing state disability program because each state and tribe has their own. So it's going to look a little different from state to state, which is why the authorities within each state need folks that know something about FASD to help them create and establish the program within their state.
Yeah, I know here I'm in New York, and in our state, we have what's called the Office for Persons with Developmental Disabilities. OPWDD is the acronym. And of course, up until now, and hopefully it will change in the future with the passing of the FASD Respect Act, but FASD is not recognized as a developmental disability in my state. So my two boys who both are diagnosed with FAS, and you know how it is, every kid is different, right? So my younger son, the most profoundly impacted, also did get a diagnosis of an intellectual disability as an older teen. That diagnosis opened up the door for him to get services through OPWDD. My other son, who's just average IQ, same FAS diagnosis, didn't qualify for any services at all. I mean, I suppose we could fight it, but he's actually a little more higher functioning. He can drive, he is working, he finished a welding program. So he's doing pretty well, but there are, a lot of other challenges as well. But every family, I think, our listeners are I'm sure they're all shaking their heads because it's challenging in most states. It's not recognized. It's hard to get the diagnosis. I know families who have literally, in my state, who have accepted an autism diagnosis for their kiddo, knowing that's not what they have, but yet that was the only way to get supports and services. You know,
Right.
kind of that's another whole topic, right? Because I know as you and I are talking and recording this last night, the president came on and they announced this whole thing about autism, and it's like, you know, I don't know if Tylenol has anything to do with anything. I don't know if immunizations have anything to do with anything, but I do know they're like missing the mark with not understanding FASD, because so many of, you know, the numbers of individuals with an autism diagnosis, may or may not have autism, but it is likely that many of them were not all of them. I'm not saying that that's the cause either of autism, but we know people whose kids have this diagnosis, have an autism diagnosis only because they have FASD and it was the only way to get help. So it needs to be taken more seriously and looked at. And maybe they're on the way to that, because at least they're paying attention to this now, in passing the FASD Respect Act.
Right, right. This is the first step toward a comprehensive strategy addressing FASD at the national level. So it's wonderful. It's groundbreaking. It's huge. How exactly it's going to trickle all the way down in any one particular state is hard to say at this point.
Yeah, because most states lack, you went to Minnesota. Minnesota's probably the leading state, I'm going to guess, in the country, who have really done a decent job with this, where you can get diagnosed, where there are supports and services, while there's awareness. Um, I don't know, maybe of any of other states that you could say are kind of headed in that direction or there as well, but most aren't.
Right. Each state is unique. Washington and Alaska are up there too. They have progressive FASD services. Um, each state also indicates what their diagnosis, or what their not diagnosis, what their criteria is for indicating whether someone qualifies as a disabled person. Some states have a functional diagnosis or adaptive functioning diagnosis, which is exactly what we need for FASD. Most states do not. So each state is unique. And folding FASD into that state system is going to be a process. It provides an opportunity for our state level organizations to become involved in that.
Mm. Yeah. So again, parents have to fight the good fight, right? It's the parents advocating. FASD United, we know, has done a fabulous job, and the affiliates around the country, and we just have to keep on keeping on, and hopefully it'll make a difference one day moving forward, right? But this is a huge step forward.
And we can learn from each other. I mean, having your podcast and other areas where we can get together and we can share what's working and we can share what's not working too, to avoid the pitfalls and to work together. Even though each state is different, we can learn from each other and identify how we can make progress in this field.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And we'll put a link in the show notes as well to FASD United, because they are following this closely, and our listeners can learn more and stay on top of what's going on when it comes to policy and FASD. So we'll certainly do that. Um, as you know, our listeners are primarily foster and adoptive parents like us, many raising kiddos with FASD. They may or may not know it. I've heard from so many listeners who are like, I listened to your show and now we've figured out this is what's going on, right? Um, what words of advice or encouragement, Julia, would you offer our listeners who, again, are likely raising kiddos with FASD? Maybe they don't know it for sure, but gosh, every day is a struggle. Would you offer some words of encouragement and advice?
I think a couple of things come to mind. Find your people is number one. I mean, find your tribe. Um, Parents who are dealing with kids with FASD have a very difficult journey, and most folks don't understand it. if you can find someone who does, that's huge. It's life-changing. It's life-changing for you. It's life-changing for them. So reach out, find folks that are on the same journey, and together, it's healing. Together, it's healing for both parties. The other thing that comes to mind is, as a parent, I mean, I'll talk about me. I don't know about everybody, but I get really worried. I get really scared. It's like, what's my kid going to be as an adult? Is this terrible thing going to happen? Is that terrible thing going to happen? We do a lot of worrying and getting scared and trying to, um, arrange things to avoid the terrible things that might happen. And I think that misses the mark a bit. That as parents, something bad is going to happen in everyone's life. You don't know exactly what it is, but you cannot avoid bad things happening in life. Some negative things are going to happen at some point. You might not know what it is. And so our best way of getting, as parents, of getting ready for that is to create a nice soft place for our kids to land. That regardless of where it comes from or what shape it takes or whatever it is, we've got to have the connection and the foundation with our kids so that they know they've got somewhere to go that is safe and secure, and they can rest and know that they're loved.
Mm. I think sometimes they even worry about that. My youngest, who's 20, he'll say things and then he'll say, "So you should just get rid of me." Right. And or he'll ask questions like, will you still love me, or will you hate me if I, whatever crash the car, and he doesn't drive. He doesn't have a license. Um, but I think they worry, that, how much will my parent put up with? Am I always going to have this safe place to land? I think that they worry about that as well because, as they get older, our kids do recognize that they do have challenges. I know, my boys are both aware of their diagnosis. They respond to that differently. But it's hard. They're having a hard time, and I think they worry about the future. So, I always just say, there's nothing that you could like God, right? There's nothing that you could do that's ever going to make us stop loving you. We might not like something that you do, but we always love you, and just reassuring them all the time that no matter what, we love you. That's never going to change.
Here,
That's
here, here, here. Yeah, that's our job as parents. It's not to prevent bad things from happening. Our job is to create a safe place for the kids to go when something bad does happen.
Yeah. Yeah. And with FASD, we know, and with any kid, we can't predict outcomes or control outcomes with any of our kids, whether they're neurotypical or have FASD or whatever. There's definitely more challenges with the FASD, but we can't control those outcomes, but we can love and support. And that's so important.
Here, here.
Well, Julia, thank you. I would love to talk to you all day, but I'm just so grateful for the hard work that you've done, that you are doing in this space, for your advocacy, and for sharing your story and encouraging our listeners. Just grateful to have you on the show today.
Well, thank you, Sandra, for your work. Thank you for the light that you are shedding, or the light in a dark place that you and your podcast are. Thank you for that.
Oh, thank you. And thank you for listening to this FASD month edition of the Adoption and Foster Care Journey podcast. I hope you were inspired and encouraged by my conversation with Julia Rivera, and all of our episodes all throughout the month. If you haven't caught them all, every episode throughout September focused on FASD. So I hope that you'll check them all out if you didn't catch all of them. In addition to encouraging and equipping you through this podcast, I've got some great resources for your parenting journey. You heard our commercial about the Hope for the FASD Journey support community, and you heard Julia mention find your tribe, get your people, right? We want we need to link arms and encourage one another because this is hard. It's the hardest of the hard. So we're here for you. We have a great online group, and check it out and see if it's going to be a good fit for you, as well as parent coaching. If you're wanting more of a one-on-one parent coaching, I do that along with I use the neurobehavioral model that Julia and I talked about in coaching and in my training. So if you're looking for coaching, if you're looking for an online or in-person workshop, I do all of those. So you want to go to our website, justicefororphansny.org, and click on the adoption and foster care journey, and it'll take you to all of these resources, as well as my favorite and recommended FASD books and podcasts and websites where you can learn more. All of those resources are listed right there on the website. And make sure that you're looking for the training, the online training every month. I do offer a free 1-hour Intro to FASD online workshop. I typically offer a 3-hour workshop as well. And if you want to go even deeper, I do offer, it is now a 15-hour, which is 3-hour sessions, 5 3-hour sessions. So once a week for 5 weeks, 3 hours at a time, where we go deep into the neurobehavioral model, which is really based on the work of Diane Melvin, which you'll find in the Trying Differently Rather Than Harder book. And the next workshop that I'm leading, the next 5-week workshop that I'm leading will begin, I believe it's the last Thursday in October. So it is really only a month away. So you're going to want to sign up for that. We give certificates of completion to everybody who participates. So you can get 15 hours of, your continuing education if you're a foster parent and needing to get that. But you really want to sign up for that because that's our deepest deep dive, if that makes any sense, into FASD using the FASCETS Neurobehavioral Model. I even had, in the last time I taught it, I had a mom she's a bio mom of a 19-year-old son with autism, and she took the training and she wants to bring it to her community because her son elopes and he's wandering around, and they're constantly working with the local police department, and her church leadership doesn't really understand autism even. And so she took the training and she's like, would you do one of these in person at our community for a community meeting? And yes, I'm there. I'm on it. So it is invaluable training. So I hope that you will check that out. Again, the website is justicefororphansny.org. There is a link in the show notes so that you can click on that and find it easily. My blog is there. You can sign up for my monthly newsletter. Don't forget our socials on social media that I mentioned, the adoption and foster care journey. If you want to watch the video version of this podcast and see what my hair looks like on any given week, you can watch this podcast on YouTube. You would just have to go to the Justice for Orphans YouTube channel, and all of our podcasts, the video version, you will find there. So I hope that you will do that as well. And wherever you listen to your podcast, on Apple or wherever, leave us a review, a rating, a review. That helps this podcast to be found by more struggling adoptive and foster parents, and share it with those in your circle who might not be listening yet, so that they can feel encouraged and supported on the journey as well. So again, I'm so grateful that you spent your valuable time with me today. I am thrilled to have you along for the journey.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Adoption and Foster Care Journey podcast, brought to you by Justice for Orphans. We hope you were encouraged today. Please be sure to subscribe to this podcast and leave a review, and share it with your fellow foster and adoptive parent friends so they can be encouraged too. Be sure to find and follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Justice for Orphans, and check out our website for vital resources at justicefororphansny.org.